Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Gautron, and I have Kirk Deininger here today with us. Welcome to the webinar. Today we are going to be discussing grant management and kind of the components around that. So first, I'm going to start off the discussion today. If you're new to Autocene, I'll give you a quick primer on kind of what Autocene is about. Autocene is a no-code, low-code platform with three different pillars that kind of make up the entirety of that platform. The first is our no-code environment where you can make your applications, things like dashboards, front ends, workflow-enabled applications in which your user base will be using. The second pillar is Autocene Passport, which we'll touch on today as well. Passport is our piece of middleware and our primary integration engine. It allows you to connect all your disparate silos, your different software solutions together so that you're getting the most out of your data. And then third, which we won't be touching on today, will be Autocene Atlas, which is our contextual workflow or contextual language workflow processing artificial intelligence. It allows you to kind of digest that unstructured information and make use out of that. Definitely check out our past webinars on that, and you can see what that's all about. But today, I'm going to start off the conversation about kind of grants management and all that goes into that. So there's kind of some fundamental things that go into grant management. Number one is our applications to those grants, how we get people to apply for grants, how we begin to manage those people. The second is kind of funding and the management of those funds and the individuals who are applying for those grants. And that cycle kind of churns out and continues. You may have one or more different grants that you're offering in your organization that you want to manage with a simple solution that kind of fits your needs across those different avenues. Now, kind of Autocene as a web-based platform, what can we begin to do with this? So right now you can see on the screen, I have the web portal brought up here. So Autocene is completely web-based. That means that you can face this out to a number of different users without having the need to install software. That means you can face this out to public entities or vendors or organizations, and you can also face that same portal inwards as well to your internal organization. So everybody will have the same kind of entrance and portal that they're going to be entering to grab at these applications here. So I'm going to switch over to what I'm going to switch over to is this the application template here, or the My Applications tab. The My Applications tab is kind of everything that houses sorry, just one sec here. The My Applications tab is everything that kind of houses each application that's inside your environment. So if it's tailored towards the grants management, you will have a number of your grants management applications up front here. So it could be something as simple as the actual application page for that user who's signing in. So if that user is signing in, they may have a profile associated with them. It could be the actual grants management application that they're going to begin going through. On the contrary, if you're an administrator, you may only have access to the administration dashboard. So we'll kind of get into that as well here, where you're actually managing those grants and kind of the different accounts behind that. So kind of our first step that we'll talk about today is how do we get people to begin applying for these grants and how do we collect the information that we need here. So the first example that I'm going to talk about is our Nassau County grants application that people can actually come into and apply for a number of different grants at the same time. Okay, so they have a pick list here. And as I get into the application, you can see that there's an interface, there's a bunch of text and labels and things that are going on. This is basically the application's front end here that you're going to be interacting with. And how you face that out with your user experience is really up to you. We have a number of different library applications that you can leverage with that to kind of design your own user experience. But in terms of the municipal application here, we're giving the user a number of different selections that they can select from. So there's two different tables here. It could be affordable housing that we're looking at, or maybe other kind of low-income family housing up here. There's other questions that kind of come along with that, right? So how do we collect the information that we need? So maybe we want the public service application, and maybe I want a grant for rehabilitation of property. So based on those selections, what we have is the application popping out the things that we need to provide in terms of information that we need to collect. So these applications, they have dynamic front ends. That means you're popping out information that are relevant to the people in that moment. So if you're requiring federal and state letters or documentations, they can attach that. Or if you're asking very simple questions, you can have that as well. All that's kind of tailored to how you want your application process to work. On the contrary, you can drastically simplify your grants application process by doing kind of a breadcrumb methodology here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do applying for rental assistance here. So you can set up something as simple as this, where it kind of walks the user through their application process. So if I want to apply for rental assistance here, we're going to begin the eligibility questionnaire. And basically it's going to walk us through answering a couple of different questions here. So am I a renter? Is it lease to purchase? Is your property your primary residence? Yes. And then we'll go on to the next part here. What type of assistance are you seeking? Well, we may want rent and utilities, and we can say maybe we're 2 months past due on both of these. And then, of course, this tab has been recently added due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We can have additional kind of tailored elements come into your application very easily. So in terms of, let's say that you have a new statute or a new rule set or business plan that you want to add to your grants for eligibility or in the application process, you can easily add that to your existing application without disruption to the actual grants management system that you have. So there'd be no downtime, and that's kind of a plus with the Autocene system, is the live updatability. Well, let's say that I was laid off. Next. And let's say that we have 4 and we're not bringing in any money here. So the eligibility has cleared us and says, hey, based on the responses, you can start the application. And then it's going to start me through the application process. So again, it's kind of guiding the user in what they need to do. It creates that very easy user experience to where you're not having either rejections or kind of back and forth between your help desk line and the people who are utilizing the grant application process. So it drastically cuts down on that, and it validates that information that's kind of going into the system here. So it'll walk them through. We'll grab household information, identity, income validation. Basically, it's up to you to determine what your grants are going to be based around and what that application process looks like. Now, how do we begin to manage this? That's great. The application process, very simple. It's basically we're grabbing people, they're applying, and it's going to go through that workflow of either approving or denying or going through that process. But at a high level, how do we have viewership of the information that's traveling through Autocene? Well, Autocene's backed on a Microsoft standard SQL instance. That means you can leverage that SQL instance, or we can host it for you, and all that information is there for you to utilize. Well, we can also connect to that information and utilize that information in kind of a dashboard application like this. So let's say that somebody has applied to have their residents act as low-income housing for another tenant to come in, and let's say that the state is going to pay us based on that. Well, they've gone through the application process, so maybe we need to add their account now. Well, this SOTA escrow account tracking system acts as kind of a central hub for your administration teams to not only manage new account creations, but also manage the information based around existing accounts and their life cycle of that grant. So let's say that we want to add a new account. Well, depending on our grant here, we need these details. So you can see we have text boxes, date pickers, check boxes. There's search capabilities as well that you can implement in here. Basically, you are able to record all that information and then validate that information as well. So you can see the red asterisk there is determining what type of information and whether or not it exists. You can see that that comes up as a 12 numeric character case number there. Now, you may have this information stored in other systems. That's where Autocene Passport comes into play. You can actually grab that information and then push that into this application as well, so that you're not having to fill this out. Now, let's say that we've created a new account for that person. That may or may not happen based on their application. Again, that's configurable. But let's say that we want to start managing the payout of that grant. So I'm just going to click View Details here, and what that's going to do is that's going to drill down into this client's grant. Okay, so we have our base information. We have the base amount in which they're granted, and the existing money left to be paid out. So you can see Jessica Jane here. She was granted $13,200. We've paid out a number of money already, and this is the remaining sub-escrow balance. Well, what has happened in this place, as soon as we've added that account, we've set her up on a default pay cycle. And that cycle is created as soon as that account goes into play here. So you can see that we've had a number of different payment amounts that are going through the process here, and some comments from the administration team that they've added. But we can go into the actual payment schedule here and manage that as well here. So in this unique case, this grant cycle that New York City is using, there's two different kind of payment systems that they're utilizing. There's a mail system for actual paper checks, and then there's an escrow account created as well. So we're connecting to two kind of systems here. We're connecting to a legacy system to do check printing for the initial grants dollar amounts that are being sent out. And we're also connecting to accounting's main escrow account to create that sub-escrow account. So this is how you can begin to kind of have a central hub in which you grab all the details that you need to manage the information and push it out to those smaller systems so that you're not having to email back and forth. You have a central location to add comments and manage the information around that grant life cycle. Now, this can be determined off of any kind of payment system that you're leveraging here. We're intersecting with the bank itself, but this can be things like PayPal or Stripe or some other like global payment system that you may have that manages these grant funds. Again, this is all configured to uniquely meet this customer's needs. So the dashboard may not meet everything that you're looking for. However, you can tailor it specifically for your grant management life cycle. So as we go through the payment schedule, as this chugs along and we're paying out, we have our check numbers, we have our dates that are being issued. We can go in and we can edit whether or not that happens. Maybe the grant is cut off at a certain point. Maybe something with the client has happened. We need to cut that grant or something along those lines. You can manage your payment schedules and go into that. Again, just a very easy dashboard-esque application that meets specifically what you're looking to do. So we're not imposing how your grant management should work. Now, how does it work in the background? That's cool. I'm representing data. We can see things that are happening. Jessica Jane is getting paid here. How do we make the interconnections to things like our payment systems and other systems that may pull in the client information that either validates them for a grant or allows them to receive money? Well, that's all done through Autocene Passport here. So we're just going to switch over to Passport. Passport is a standalone engine from Autocene here. It is a piece of middleware that acts as the primary integration engine, but it also contains a set of very powerful tools that kind of contain that microservice or RPA-esque environment that you're used to seeing. Now, how does Passport work? So let's say that we wanted to manage a new customer coming in, and we want to place their information into our system. Well, an application in which they're filling out information over here is going to dump some information into the SQL database for us to use. And then we can use that information to send it to other systems that may be managing it. Things like, I don't know, SAP, or maybe you have a homegrown solution, or Microsoft Dynamics, or something along those lines, which contains that information. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to create a Passport task. Passport tasks make up the Passport environment. A task kind of is a microservice or a micro program that is easily configurable based on these essential building blocks that configure that task to operate. So let's say that we're going to populate customer information to other systems. And maybe that's task number 1 here, okay? So this is our first task. Well, how do we get the information about the person into the other system? So the application over here has submitted that to a Microsoft SQL database. Well, when that information is submitted in there, it's going to create a database event. And that's kind of the first component in Passport that is going to start the task. Passport is an event-based system. That means when something happens in another system or something happens in Passport, it's going to trigger that task to start and then do something with that information. So we have a SQL event notification, meaning let's say that that client's information has entered that SQL database table. Well, that's great. We've understood that the information has come in. How do we pick up that information? Well, we're going to go to basically a file message input and then directly into a SQL action. And I'll explain this here on kind of how this works. So we have our event. Information is entered. We're creating an empty container. Think of it as kind of like a structured container for information. Well, that empty container needs some data. So we're going to go right into the action. So we have an input file. We have an action that's going to fill up that input file. So the SQL action can be as something as simple as maybe configuring this to do a pull from SQL using a stored procedure, checking if there's new clients that need to be processed, or maybe a pull from the table so that we can compare that information. Either way is fine. It's up to you and kind of how you configure and develop out this task that works with your system. We pull in some information. Well, now we need it to go to another system so that it can populate that system, because we are treating SQL as kind of the source of this information. So let's say that it's going to go to SharePoint. Well, we may need to transform that information. So we're picking up some information inside the task. So now there's data inside the task. Now we're changing that data. So we're changing the structure of that data to meet the needs of the different system. Well, maybe we want to stick that into SharePoint now as maybe a SharePoint document or something along those lines into that directory. So now we have SharePoint. So take in information, change that information, and then action that information to the other system. Each action works in sequence. So pull, change, submit. So it's kind of almost a configured crude statement if you're used to that. And that would be the end of the task. And we're going to say no output. Well, it may be just one other system that you're sticking this into, like SharePoint. But what happens if you have other systems that also need this information? Well, I'm just going to remove that no output. And we're going to do a file message output. And we're going to create a new task. So maybe we have a second task here that's when you send it to a different database. So we'll pick up that file that's output. So pick up, change the file, submit to SharePoint, spit out that file, and then pick up that file here. Well, we then ingest that file. We can maybe change it further, and maybe we need something like an XML to JSON parser or something along those lines. You can stick that in, and then maybe we transform that into, I don't know, let's maybe an FTP action for the other system to pick up. So maybe that other system relies on an FTP pickup. So pick up the used information from the last task, ingest that information, change it, and then drop it in an SFTP location for it to pick up. That's very common. Or it could be a very unique adapter in Passport that's specifically configured for a third-party system. So I brought up DocuSign. Let's say maybe you want to create a document behind the scenes. You can do that as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually put on another file message output here. So that's great. We've populated 2 silos here. Now I want a notification that the tasks are complete and that everything is healthy. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a third task. And we're going to say notification. Maybe I want to receive a notification that this was submitted fine. So again, I'm going to reuse that information that was created in this task, has gone through this task, and now is entering this task to let me know through an email action or a notification to a group or distributed box that that has happened. And then I'll put a no output. So you can see here, I've just been building task on task, and we've created a pipeline of not only populating 2 silos of information from an application for a grant, and then notified our team that this task has successfully populated that information. Again, it's configurable. You're basically stacking these modules together to intertwine with each other. And that's how we can begin to connect very disparate systems. Maybe you have an AS400 that you primarily use for information gathering. Well, that's a very terminal-based system. So you may utilize our terminal-based Passport task to pick up that information and then populate that to maybe a newer SaaS solution. Maybe you're utilizing ServiceNow to manage a ticket behind that. So maybe create a ticket and maybe dump that information into maybe a Dynamics environment or something along those lines. So that's it for today for our webinar and kind of discussing the different pathways of grant management. We just discussed how you can create an application process. We showed you a dashboard in which you can manage those grants and the money spent from that. And also Passport and how in the background that's connecting to your different systems that may need that grant information, such as your payment systems or your CRMs. How do you subscribe to Autocene? How do you pay for this? How does licensing work within Autocene? Well, Autocene is based on our application templates here. So for your grant management solution, well, you may need an application. So that would be one of our application templates. Well, you may need an administration dashboard. That's 2 of our application templates so far. So what we do is we license Autocene in these pack of 5 templates that make up those applications that you're configuring or taking from our application library to configure yourself. These templates, they're either a portion of your business process or they could be the entirety of your business process. You determine kind of how that application works within that template. There's no transaction cost behind that. There's no per seat cost basis on that. Basically, you're subscribing to use that template slot in whatever way that you see fit. In terms of Passport, we also have subscription to our Passport engine here. So if you want to integrate your information to other systems and create these Passport tasks, you can also subscribe to the Autocene Passport system to kind of further increase your data's value there. Is there anything you want to add, Kirk, before we close out for today?
No, I was going to touch on the licensing as well, but thank you for taking care of that, Andrew, and you did a great job today.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for stopping in for today's webinar. Look out for future webinars on kind of how Autocene solves a number of different problems. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Andrew.